Dan Illman, Mike Beer, grade one action on the Queen's Plate Sunday card at Woodbine. Let's throw up the field for the Highlander. We're going 3/4 of a mile on the turf. This is a race for 3-year-olds and up. And you see an even money favorite. And that's the number 7 Caravel, a filly taking on the boys off two hugely impressive Beyer speed figures in winning both the Goldwood and Caress. Now she gets a bit of the acid test against the males' first-time Grand Motion.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm sure this will be tougher for her, but make no mistake about it, this filly's good. Her last 2 races are legit.
She's tactical as well. We'll throw up the Timeform US pace projector for this race. Timeform US believes this race will be run at a solid pace. Turn to Side is a pretty fast horse. The Shakertown last time out, he just completely got knocked off stride at the start. So I think Turn to Side's the speed of this race because City Boy and Silent Poet, while they're fast, in the past, Mike, kind of they've set rated paces in these big races. Turn to Side's more of a burner.
Yeah, Turn to Side's been up close to some pretty quick paces. I mean, he's not a horse who's ever, necessarily been on the lead in his races, but he likes to get right up close. And maybe this is the spot where he's off a little bit of a layoff too. So maybe they'll just put him right on the front.
Now, a horse that would really appreciate that red bar fast pace scenario is the one, Old Chestnut. 3 for 3 at Woodbine, including this race last month. An optional claiming event going 6.5 furlongs. There was some pace on in this race. We see Old Chestnut down on the inside in the second flight, still has some work to do, but has the long stretch and is going to be able to get through. He didn't break very well in this race, but he shows a lot of heart to get up.
Yeah, very game in this race. Always has he's down inside, Dan, which isn't always a great place to be, but he always had room, and he's just going to get up. You can see a bunch of horses, trying to get there at the end. He was the one who got there. He ran fine in that race. It feels like this is just going to be way tougher for him, but listen, this horse is maybe a little bit underrated, and he's going to be a price.
Admiral Pier is a really cool horse, and if you just look at this entry card and see 15-1, you might not give him the respect he deserves. He's banked over $400,000 in his career. It seems like every year up at Woodbine, he's banging away in these major races, and occasionally he even gets a piece. He's also a graded stakes winner in the States. Now, last time out in the Niagara going 1 1/8, he was just caught up in a wicked pace. You can draw a line through that race. Is the 6 just too short for him?
I don't want to say it's too short for him, in the grand scheme of things. I just wonder if it's too short for him as he makes this kind of a cutback in distance, Dan. I mean, 4 straight races going longer than this. I mean, it's just really hard to cut back on turf, it seems like. And they've tried that with this horse several times in the past, and it hasn't been successful. He's a really good horse. I just wonder if this is the right spot.
Turn to Side really turned heads when he won the Turf Sprint Championship at Aqueduct towards the end of 2020. I thought it was a very impressive performance where he pushed the pace outside throughout and then just kept right on rolling. Now, you and I were a little bit disappointed in his seasonal debut, but who knew the Critical Way would turn out to be one of the better turf sprinters in the country? And we talked about the Shakertown. He lost all chance at the start.
Yeah, we'll see what he does here. This horse showed an awful lot of ability early on for trainer Linda Rice. He ran some really good races. Even some of the races he didn't win, he ran really well in some of those spots. He was part of that Paul Pompa dispersal. They paid a lot of money for this horse. And for whatever reason, he just hasn't been as good since Mark Cassie's taken over. I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for the Tampa race where he just sort of got hooked up contesting the pace. Got a little tired off of a little bit of a layoff. Going 5 furlongs too didn't have to be his favorite thing. So I was a little forgiving of him for that race. He did get bumped at the start last time. He was also terrible in that race. Maybe that's why he got time off. If he comes back and runs one of his good ones, he can beat this field.
Mike, is Chuck Willis a potential speed of the speed candidate? Had a 4-race win streak snapped last time out in the Connaught Cup, going 7/8 of a mile. Quite a wet turf course and some decent runners that day. My concern with Chuck Willis isn't really distance and it isn't really pace because we know he has a lot of it. I wonder if he was exposed just a bit stepping up into the graded ranks last time.
I wonder that too. If he was some kind of big price in here, Dan, I would just say, 7 furlongs, it's a totally different kind of race against those horses. And maybe he's just better going these shorter distances. I think that's, a valid argument that could be made in his defense. If he's going to be a price, I'm going to look at him that way. But if he takes money in here, I don't want this horse.
Honey Won't just ran 11th of 12 in a two-turn mile on the inner turf. We know Honey Won't from when Bill Mott had him in New York and Florida, and we never thought he'd run in a grade one.
Yeah, we know him from New York when he was a claiming horse.
City Boy is the number 6, and City Boy won the Grade 2 Nearctic in 2019, and then ran some really nice races last year, including a runner-up effort in the Nearctic. Now, in that race, Silent Poet and City Boy just controlled it throughout. They walked on the lead, they ran 1-2 all the way around, and City Boy couldn't get by, and that's kind of been City Boy's story. As we see his seasonal debut, a pretty good prep, going 5 furlongs on the inner turf. He gets close to the pace, but does this horse really have the killer instinct? It takes him a while to get past Celebratory on the lead, and eventually he gets run down. I expect him to do better second off the layoff. I like his tactical speed. I think he's going to sit a good trip. Does he really want to beat you? He did in the Nearctic in 2019.
He did. We'll see, Dan. He's just a hard horse to take on top, especially at the 9-2 morning line. He just doesn't win often enough for me. I expect him to be in the thick of things here in the stretch. I just don't want to bet him.
And here's Caravel. She's won 7 of 9. This is her beating fellow fillies in the Caress at Saratoga, going 5.5. She got a great trip in this race. She saved ground early. Arad took her to the outside on the turn for a clear run. Robin Sparkles is a nice filly, and Caravel is eventually going to inhale her in the inside the 8th pole and go on to win. The buyer speaks for itself. A 98. She gets Lasix once again.
Just really, really good in this race where they, sat a little bit. They knew that Robin Sparkles was the horse to beat, and they're going to the lead. They didn't care. They just sat off it, ran her over in the stretch. She was really impressive two-back under similar tactics. And she's one of those horses, Dan, who isn't going to be compromised by pace. She's got plenty of tactical speed. She's a really good horse, and she's the horse to beat.
Silent Poets won 9 of 16 on turf. That's nothing to sneeze at. He won the Nearctic last year again, a race in which he controlled it throughout. They ran 1-2, and since then, he hasn't come back to form. But I wonder, Mike, if you make the same argument with Silent Poet that you did earlier on with the Chuck Willis, in that he ran 7 furlongs in his last 2 starts, and maybe that's just a little bit far for him. Perhaps the cut back to 6 is what he wants.
He could be better cutting back to 6. I guess the difference with Silent Poet is he's a multiple graded stakes winner going 7 in the past, but maybe he just doesn't want to go that far anymore. I don't love his last 2 races, but I know he's good enough to beat this field, that he's got speed. I mean, is he really going to be 12-1? I get that his last 2 races aren't great, but if he's 12-1, it feels like that's a pretty fair price to me.
That's the question of this race, and perhaps the key to betting this race. Is Silent Poet going to be 12-1? If people think that he is completely off form and that it's over, he might. I have a feeling he's going to be slightly shorter based on his overall body of work. Top pick time for the Highlander. Caravel's been very impressive. I don't really want to play too much into this race. I like Silent Poet at the price. You're going to give Turn Decide one more chance, and why not? That Aqueduct race was really eye-popping.
Yeah, and listen, based on his New York form as a 3-year-old, as a 2-year-old, late 2-year-old, and an early 3-year-old, he could beat this field. I don't know if he's still that horse anymore, but there's been a layoff since we last saw him. It feels like maybe something went wrong. If he comes back and he's in good form, he can win this race.
Let's go and Turn Decide. I think Caravel will run well. I want to bet a little bit of Silent Poet in any kind of multiple race wagers if he goes off, around 7-8-1. It's the Grade 1 Highlander. It's on the undercard, amazingly enough, a Grade 1 race, because Queen's Plate Sunday is a superstar card. Good luck.